William Henry Harrison, the ninth President of the United States, is best remembered not for what he accomplished during his presidency, but for the brief time he served as president and the circumstances surrounding his death. Born on February 9, 1773, at Berkeley Plantation in Charles City County, Virginia, Harrison was born into a prominent political family. His father, Benjamin Harrison V, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a former governor of Virginia. This prestigious lineage provided William with connections and status, though he initially pursued a military career before fully transitioning to politics. Harrison's early life was shaped by a good education and military service. He briefly studied medicine before joining the Army in 1791, where he served on the American frontier during the Northwest Indian War. His leadership and victories, specifically at the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811, elevated his reputation. These military successes helped build his political brand as a capable leader. He served as the governor of the Indiana Territory, and later as a congressman and senator from Ohio. His presidential campaign in 1840 capitalized heavily on his heroic image to rally support. In 1840, Harrison ran as the Whig Party's candidate and won the election. At 68 years old, Harrison was the oldest man elected to the presidency at the time. Determined to demonstrate his strength despite his age, Harrison delivered the longest inaugural speech in history, with it lasting for nearly 2 hours in cold, wet weather without wearing a hat, coat, or gloves. Shortly after his inauguration, Harrison fell ill. Initially, his symptoms were diagnosed as a cold, but his condition rapidly worsened and was soon believed to be pneumonia. However, modern medical historians suggest that his illness may have been caused by enteric fever brought on by contaminated water near the White House. Regardless of the exact cause, his health deteriorated steadily. Despite the best efforts of the physicians at the time, Harrison died on April 4, 1841, just 31 days after taking office. He was the first U.S. president to die in office. Harrison's death had significant political implications and left the nation in a brief period of uncertainty. The U.S. Constitution at the time was vague about the line of succession. It stated that presidential powers would devolve upon the vice president, but it was unclear whether the vice president would become the actual president or merely act as one. Vice President John Tyler, however, asserted that he was now the full president and took the oath of office. Harrison's sudden death was a shock to the nation. Although his presidency was so brief, Harrison's death reshaped how the nation approached the continuity of executive power. Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States, was a national war hero who died unexpectedly only 16 months into his presidency. Born on November 24, 1784, in Orange County, Virginia, Taylor was raised on the Kentucky frontier, where his family moved when he was still a child. Though born into a prominent family with ties to the early American aristocracy, Taylor received only a modest formal education. His upbringing on the frontier shaped his rough character and helped develop the practical mindset he carried throughout his military and political career. Taylor began his professional life as a career soldier, entering the United States Army in 1808. Over the course of 4 decades, he earned a reputation for bravery and leadership during several military conflicts, including the War of 1812, the Black Hawk War, and most notably the Mexican-American War. His victories at numerous battles made him a national hero and household name. These triumphs, combined with his image as a no-nonsense leader, made him an appealing candidate for the Whig Party despite his lack of political experience or clear party allegiance. In 1848, Taylor was elected president, and he took office in March 1849, becoming the second president to win the office, primarily due to military fame. He was not easily controlled by party politics, which earned him both respect and frustration from various political factions. Taylor's presidency occurred during a period of intense sectional tension over the issue of slavery, especially as new territories acquired from the Mexican-American War were debating whether to allow slavery. Taylor opposed the expansion of slavery into these new territories, which put him at odds with Southern leaders, despite being a slaveholder himself. Though he took a moderate stance and sought to preserve the Union, his time in office was too short to significantly shape national policy. Taylor's sudden and mysterious death in July 1850 shocked the nation. The events leading up to his death began on July 4, 1850, when he attended a lengthy Independence Day celebration at the Washington Monument. It was an extremely hot day, and after being outside for several hours, Taylor reportedly consumed large amounts of raw fruit. That evening, he fell violently ill with stomach cramps and severe gastrointestinal distress. His condition worsened over the next several days. Despite medical attention, which included the use of questionable treatment common in that era, Taylor died on July 9, 1850, at the age of 65. The cause of his death was officially recorded as acute gastroenteritis, likely caused by contaminated food or water. However, speculation has lingered over the years, with some historians suggesting the possibility of poisoning. In 1991, Taylor's remains were tested for signs of arsenic poisoning, but no evidence supported that theory. It is now widely accepted that his death was due to natural causes, worsened by the unsanitary conditions of the time. Taylor's death had important political consequences. He opposed the Compromise of 1850, a series of bills designed to ease tensions between North and South by balancing free and slave state interests. With Taylor's death, Vice President Millard Fillmore assumed the presidency and supported the compromise, helping to push it through Congress. This shift in leadership temporarily diffused the growing national conflict, though it only delayed the inevitable outbreak of the Civil War a decade later. Though his presidency was short and his legacy overshadowed by his sudden death, Zachary Taylor remains a significant figure in American history. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, is widely regarded as one of the greatest leaders in American history. He was born on February 12, 1809, in a log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky. Lincoln came from humble beginnings, raised in a poor frontier family with limited access to formal education. He was mostly self-taught, developing a deep love for reading and learning. His early life was defined by hardship, including the death of his mother when he was 9, and years of manual labor on farms and in small towns. Lincoln moved to Illinois as a young man, where he worked as a store clerk, rail splitter, and postmaster before studying law and becoming a successful attorney. His ability to connect with ordinary Americans, combined with his intelligence, wit, and moral clarity, propelled him into politics. He served in the Illinois state legislature and one term in the U.S. House of Representatives. However, it was his debates with Stephen A. Douglas during the 1858 Illinois state race that brought him national attention. Though he lost the Senate seat, his stance on slavery and the Union elevated him as a rising star in the newly formed Republican Party. In 1860, Lincoln was elected president amid growing tensions over slavery. His election triggered the secession of Southern states and the start of the Civil War. As president, Lincoln was committed to preserving the Union, even at great cost. He faced tremendous political and military challenges, but his leadership remained steady. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, shifting the war's focus to include the abolition of slavery. He also pushed for the passage of the 13th Amendment, which ultimately outlawed slavery in the United States. Public opinion of Lincoln during his presidency was deeply divided. He was deeply respected by many in the North and viewed as a symbol of unity and justice, but despised by many in the South and even criticized by some in his own party for either being too harsh or too lenient. By the end of the Civil War, however, Lincoln's leadership was gaining broader appreciation. His re-election in 1864 was seen as a mandate to finish the war and begin healing the divided nation. Tragically, Lincoln did not live to see the full outcome of his efforts. On the evening of April 14, 1865, Lincoln attended a play, Our American Cousin, at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. During the performance, he was shot in the back of the head by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and well-known actor. Booth had planned the assassination as part of a larger conspiracy to revive the Confederate cause by decapitating the Union government. Lincoln was carried across the street to the Peterson House, where he lay unconscious throughout the night. He died the next morning at the age of 56. The first American president to be assassinated, Lincoln's death plunged the country into mourning. Tens of thousands of Americans lined railroad tracks as his body was transported back to Illinois for burial. The impact of Lincoln's assassination was profound. It left the country leaderless during the fragile beginnings of Reconstruction, with Vice President Andrew Johnson assuming the presidency. Johnson lacked Lincoln's vision and political skill, and his presidency was viewed as controversial and decisive. Lincoln's death robbed the nation of a unifying figure who might have guided a more peaceful and effective post-war reconciliation. With that being said, Lincoln's legacy continues on, and he became a symbol of American ideals, equality, liberty, and national unity. His leadership during the nation's darkest hour left an undeniable mark, and his tragic death elevated him to a larger-than-life status, with many viewing him as one of, if not the best, presidents to ever serve the country. James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, had one of the most remarkable yet tragically short presidencies in American history. Born on November 19, 1831, in a log cabin in Orange Township, Ohio, Garfield was raised in poverty by his widowed mother after his father died when he was just 18 months old. Despite these early hardships, Garfield was determined to rise above his circumstances. He worked various jobs and eventually attended Williams College in Massachusetts, graduating in 1856. A strong intellect and moral conviction led him to become a professor and later the president of what would become Hiram College in Ohio. Garfield entered politics in the 1850s as a member of the anti-slavery Republican Party. During the Civil War, he served as a Union Army general and earned recognition for his leadership and bravery. After the war, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for 18 years. Known for his speaking skills, deep knowledge of finance, and commitment to civil rights, Garfield gained respect in Congress. In 1880, he attended the Republican National Convention intending to support another candidate, but after a stalemate between the frontrunners, Garfield himself emerged as a compromise nominee and was unexpectedly chosen as the Republican candidate for president. Garfield won the election and took office in March 1881. Though his time in office lasted only about 6 months, he showed promise as a reform-minded leader. One of his key goals was civil service reform, aiming to reduce corruption in government jobs. He also worked to strengthen federal authority and advocated for African American rights in the South. Garfield's presidency was widely seen as hopeful and full of potential, and the public generally viewed him favorably during the brief time he served. Garfield's presidency was cut tragically short by an act of political violence. On July 2, 1881, just months into his term, Garfield was shot at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. by Charles J. Guiteau, a mentally unstable man who believed he deserved a government job due to his minor support of Garfield's campaign. When his requests for a diplomatic appointment were denied, Guiteau became enraged and convinced himself that killing the president would benefit the country and earn him glory. Garfield did not die immediately. One bullet grazed his arm, and the other lodged in his abdomen. In the months that followed, his health deteriorated due to infection and poor medical care. Despite brief periods of improvement, his condition worsened. Garfield was moved to New Jersey shore in hopes that the sea air might aid his recovery, but he died on September 19, 1881, after 79 days of suffering. Garfield's death shocked the nation, with his assassination fueling growing concerns about presidency security and the stability of American democracy. Today, Garfield is remembered for what he managed to accomplish in his short time in office. William McKinley, the 25th President of the United States, served during a transformative period in American history, guiding the nation into the 20th century with policies that expanded its global influence. Born on January 29, 1843, in Niles, Ohio, McKinley came from a working-class family and was the 7th of 9 children. His upbringing was modest but stable, and he attended Allegheny College briefly before illness and financial issues forced him to withdraw. He enlisted in the Union Army during the Civil War, where he rose to the rank of major, a title he proudly carried throughout his life. After the war, McKinley studied law and entered politics, serving as a U.S. congressman for most of the years. Between 1877 and 1891, he was known for his strong support of protective tariffs to shield American industries from foreign competition, which became a central theme of his political identity. McKinley later served as governor of Ohio from 1892 to 1896, where he gained a reputation as a pragmatic and fair-minded leader. His steady character and economic expertise helped him secure the Republican nomination for president in 1896. Elected in 1896 and again in 1900, McKinley presided over a period of economic growth and rising American nationalism. His presidency is most associated with the Spanish-American War in 1898, which resulted in the U.S. acquiring overseas territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. These acquisitions marked the emergence of the United States as an imperial power. McKinley also maintained the gold standard, which stabilized the economy and supported high tariffs to protect American jobs. Public opinion of McKinley was generally positive. He was viewed as a calm, capable, and likable leader who avoided unnecessary conflict and promoted prosperity. However, McKinley's second term was cut short by assassination. On September 6, 1901, he was attending the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. While greeting the public at a reception line in the Temple of Music, McKinley was approached by Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist who concealed a revolver under a handkerchief. As McKinley extended his arm to greet him, Cholgas shot the president twice in the abdomen. One bullet grazed McKinley, but the other struck vital organs and lodged in his body. At first, doctors were optimistic about McKinley's recovery. He was treated at a nearby hospital, and the wound was closed despite doctors being unable to locate the second bullet. For several days, McKinley appeared to be improving. However, on September 13th, his condition suddenly worsened due to infection spreading from the wound. On the morning of September 14th, 1901, William McKinley died at the age of 58. His last words reportedly were, "It is God's way, His will be done." McKinley's assassination shocked the nation. He was the third sitting U.S. president to be assassinated, with fears of political violence growing even more. His death also brought Theodore Roosevelt, the vice president, into the presidency. Roosevelt's rise to power resulted in a significant shift in American politics, as he brought a more progressive and assertive approach to the office. McKinley's death marked the end of an era of relatively conservative, business-oriented leadership and the beginning of a more dynamic, reform-driven presidency. The impact of his death helped reshape the presidency in the direction of the nation in the new century. Warren G. Harding, the 29th President of the United States, served during the early 1920s, a time of transition following World War I. Born on November 2, 1865 in Blooming Grove, Ohio, Harding was raised in a rural, middle-class family. His father was a doctor and farmer, and his mother had once been a teacher. Harding attended Ohio Central College and graduated in 1882. He pursued a career in newspaper publishing, purchasing and running a small local newspaper that eventually became quite successful. His calm demeanor and public speaking skills helped him gain popularity in his community. Harding entered politics in the 1890s, serving in the Ohio State Senate and later as lieutenant governor. After a brief hiatus from public service, he returned to the political scene and was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1914. While in the Senate, Harding was known for his low-key style and loyalty to the Republican Party, though he made few waves in national politics. In 1920, he emerged as a compromise candidate for the Republican presidential nomination. His campaign for a return to normalcy resonated with voters wary of war, international entanglements, and progressive reforms. As president, Harding was personally popular and widely seen as a decent but somewhat indecisive leader. With that being said, Harding's administration became tainted by corruption scandals that emerged both during and after his presidency. The most infamous scandal was the Teapot Dome affair, in which the Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, secretly leased federal oil reserves to private companies in exchange for bribes. Several of Harding's appointees were involved in other corrupt activities, casting a shadow over his administration. Though Harding himself was not directly implicated, critics argue that his overly trusting nature allowed corruption to flourish. In the summer of 1923, Harding embarked on a cross-country speaking tour known as the Voyage of Understanding, intending to connect with the American people and promote his policies. He traveled by train across the western United States and into Alaska, becoming the first sitting president to visit the territory. However, as the tour progressed, Harding began to suffer from exhaustion and illness. He experienced symptoms including chest pain, digestive problems, and fatigue. On his return journey, he arrived in San Francisco and checked into the Palace Hotel, where his condition rapidly deteriorated. On the evening of August 2, 1923, Harding died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 57. His death shocked the nation, as no serious illness had been publicly disclosed beforehand. At the time, his passing was met with widespread mourning and tributes, as many Americans remembered him as a likable and unifying figure during a period of peace and economic prosperity. However, the full scale of the scandals with his administration came to light after his death, tarnishing his legacy. Public opinion shifted, and Harding's reputation suffered significantly. He came to be seen as a well-meaning but ineffective leader, who was overwhelmed by the responsibilities of office and poorly served by those he had trusted. Today, Warren G. Harding is often ranked among the least effective presidents. Nonetheless, his passing resulted in the end of an era and set the stage for the presidency of Calvin Coolidge, who would seek to restore integrity to the office. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, was one of the most influential leaders in American history, guiding the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. Born on January 30, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York, Roosevelt came from a wealthy and prominent family. He was a distant cousin of former President Theodore Roosevelt and enjoyed a privileged upbringing, attending elite schools such as Harvard and Columbia University. Despite his aristocratic background, Roosevelt developed a strong sense of public service and reform, inspired in part by his cousin's progressive politics. Roosevelt began his political career in 1910, when he was elected to the New York State Senate. His charisma and progressive ideas quickly earned him recognition. He later served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy under President Woodrow Wilson, a role that helped prepare him for national leadership. In 1921, he was struck by polio, which left him paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. Despite this personal challenge, he remained active in politics and eventually became governor of New York in 1929. Gaining a reputation as a proactive leader during the early years of the Great Depression. In 1932, Roosevelt was elected president. Taking office at the height of the economic crisis, he launched the New Deal, a sweeping series of government programs and reforms designed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. These policies expanded the role of the federal government in American life and helped stabilize the economy. Roosevelt was re-elected 3 times, serving an unprecedented 4 terms. He led the country through the depths of the Depression and into World War II, during which his leadership and communication skills reassured the public and helped build a sense of unity and purpose. Public opinion of Roosevelt was deeply divided. He was adored by millions of Americans who credited him with saving the country from collapse, but also criticized by conservatives who believed he expanded government power too far. Nevertheless, his impact was undeniable. As a wartime leader, Roosevelt forged strong alliances with the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union, helping to shape the Allied response to Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. He also played a key role in laying the groundwork for the United States in the post-war international order. In the later years of the war, Roosevelt's health began to decline significantly. The stress of leading the country through 2 major crises, combined with his long battle with polio and other health issues, took a severe toll on his body. He suffered from high blood pressure and heart disease. Despite visible signs of fatigue and illness, Roosevelt continued to work tirelessly, even traveling to the Yalta Conference in early 1945 to meet with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin to discuss the post-war world. On April 12, 1945, while in Warm Springs, Georgia, Roosevelt suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage and died at the age of 63. He had been sitting for a portrait painting when he suddenly complained of a severe headache and collapsed. Millions of Americans mourned his passing, and memorial services were held across the country. Vice President Harry S. Truman was suddenly thrust into the presidency and soon faced the monumental task of concluding the war, including the decision to use atomic bombs against Japan. Roosevelt's passing also symbolized a transition in global leadership as the US moved from isolationism to becoming a dominant world power. His death left a significant emotional void, and his legacy has continued to influence American politics and global affairs to this very day. John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, remains one of the most iconic and tragic figures in American history. Born on May 29, 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, Kennedy came from a wealthy and politically connected Irish Catholic family. His father was a powerful businessman and government official, and he had high expectations for his children. John, often called Jack, was well educated, attending prestigious schools such as Harvard University. Despite suffering from chronic health issues throughout his life, Kennedy developed a strong interest in public service, specifically in foreign affairs and history. Kennedy served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. After a heroic rescue of his crew following an attack, he returned home a decorated war veteran. His wartime experience, charm, and political family background propelled him into politics. In 1946, Kennedy was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, and in 1952, he won a seat in the U.S. Senate. During his Senate career, he built a reputation as an articulate and forward-thinking politician, and in 1960 he ran for president as the Democratic nominee, defeating Richard Nixon in one of the closest elections in U.S. history. As president, Kennedy brought a youthful energy and sense of idealism to the White House. He famously called on Americans to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. His administration focused on civil rights, space exploration, economic growth, and a strong stance against communism. Major events of his presidency included the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the beginning stages of U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and early civil rights legislation. He also launched the Peace Corps and strongly supported the Apollo space program. Public opinion of Kennedy during his presidency was generally favorable. He was admired for his intelligence, charisma, and ability to communicate effectively with the public. However, he also faced criticism for some policy decisions, specifically regarding Cuba and Vietnam. Despite these challenges, Kennedy was seen as a symbol of hope and progress, specifically by younger Americans in marginalized communities. Tragically, Kennedy's presidency was cut short on November 22, 1963. While riding in an open motorcade through downtown Dallas, Texas, he was shot and killed by a sniper as he passed through Dealey Plaza. Kennedy was struck twice, once in the upper back and once in the head, and was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. Central Time at Parkland Memorial Hospital. He was just 46 years old. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, who was riding in a separate car, was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One later that day. Americans were glued to their televisions as the horrifying events unfolded. Schools, businesses, and government offices closed in mourning. 4 days of national grief followed, culminating in a widely watched state funeral. The suspected assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was captured later that day but was killed 2 days later by nightclub owner Jack Ruby, fueling widespread speculation and conspiracy theories that continue to this day. Investigations, including the Warren Commission, concluded that Oswald acted alone, but doubts still linger. John F. Kennedy's death had a profound impact. His unfinished policies, specifically on civil rights in Vietnam, were left for Lyndon Johnson to address. Nonetheless, Kennedy's legacy, shaped by both his promise and his premature death, has made him one of the most admired presidents in American history. Thank you very much for watching this video, and if you learned something, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below your thoughts on any of the presidents I discussed in this video, and subscribe if you would like to see more like this one. Thank you again, and goodbye.